The seeds of sacrifice. The cool morning breeze swept through the bustling streets of Lagos, carrying with it the scent of freshly baked bread, roasted plantains, and the energy of a city alive with possibility. Among the crowd, Adebayo walked briskly to work, his briefcase swinging at his side. His tailored suit spoke of a man on the rise, while his distant expression hinted at inner turmoil. His wife, Adesua, stood at the window of their modest apartment, her hand resting gently on her growing belly. She watched him disappear into the sea of people, her heart heavy with unspoken words. Adesua had always been the rock of their marriage. From the day she met Adebayo at a community event years ago, she knew he was ambitious, driven, and destined for greatness. He had a magnetism about him that drew her in, a charm that made her believe he could conquer the world. But it was also that same ambition that often left her feeling like a shadow in his life. The early days. Their love story began simply, in the small village where they both grew up. Adebayo, the son of a struggling farmer, had always dreamed of escaping the confines of rural life. Adesua, on the other hand, was the village teacher's daughter, content with a life of simplicity and service. When Adebayo proposed after securing his first job in the city, Adesua didn't hesitate. She left her teaching job, her family, and the familiarity of the village to follow him to Lagos. At first, city life was exhilarating. Adebayo's job in finance brought them stability, and Adesua's nurturing nature made their apartment a warm haven. But as Adebayo climbed the corporate ladder, their lives began to change. Late nights at the office became the norm, and his focus shifted from their humble beginnings to the glittering world of success he so desperately sought. A new life, a growing distance. Months turned into years, and the gap between them widened. Adesua had hoped that starting a family would bring them closer together, and her pregnancy had filled her with a renewed sense of purpose. But Adebayo seemed distracted, his mind often elsewhere. It wasn't until one sleepless night, as Adesua prepared a late-night snack in the kitchen, that she overheard a phone conversation that shattered her illusions. "Yes, I think about you too," Adebayo said, his voice soft and unfamiliar. "It's complicated, but I can't help how I feel." Adesua froze, the cup of tea trembling in her hands. She didn't need to hear more to understand what was happening. Adebayo's heart wasn't entirely hers anymore. The sacrifice. The next morning, Adesua confronted him. Her voice was steady, though her heart felt like it might break. "Adebayo, who was that on the phone last night?" He avoided her gaze, running a hand through his hair. "It's not what you think," he said, but the guilt in his eyes betrayed him. "It's someone from my past, someone I never got over." Adesua's stomach churned, but she remained composed. "And yet you married me." "I did," he admitted, his voice heavy. "Because I thought I could move on. I thought I could love you the way you deserve." Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she held them back. "I have given everything to this marriage, Adebayo. I left my home, my family, and now I'm carrying your child." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "And I'm sorry." Adesua took a deep breath, her resolve hardening. "Then you have a choice to make. You can either let go of the past and commit to this family, or—" She didn't finish the sentence. The alternative was too painful to voice. The aftermath. Days turned into weeks, and Adebayo wrestled with his emotions. He went through the motions of their life together, attending doctor's appointments, helping Adesua with household tasks, but his heart remained distant. Adesua, determined to save their marriage, poured herself into making their home a sanctuary. She cooked his favorite meals, wrote him heartfelt letters, and even suggested counseling, though he dismissed the idea. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Adesua placed his hand on her belly. "Feel that?" she asked softly. Adebayo's eyes widened as he felt the tiny kick of their unborn child. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Wonder, perhaps even joy. But it was fleeting. He pulled his hand away, his gaze clouding once more. a glimpse of hope. Despite the growing distance between them, Adejua refused to give up. She began volunteering at a local shelter for women and children, finding solace in helping others. It gave her a sense of purpose outside her troubled marriage and reminded her of the strength she possessed. One evening, as she prepared to leave for the shelter, Adebayo stopped her at the door. "Why do you keep doing this?" he asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "Why do you keep fighting for something that feels broken?" Adejua looked at him, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. "Because love isn't about perfection, Adebayo. It's about commitment. And I made a vow to you, not just in front of God and our families, but in my heart. I still believe in us, even if you don't." Her words stayed with him long after she left. For the first time, Adebayo began to see his wife in a new light, not as the woman he had taken for granted, but as a beacon of strength and resilience. A turning point. As the months went by, Adejua's belly grew, and with it, a sense of urgency. Adebayo couldn't ignore the life they were bringing into the world. One night, as he watched Adejua sleeping peacefully, her hands resting protectively over their child, he felt a pang of regret. He realized he was on the verge of losing something irreplaceable. The next morning, he made a decision. It wouldn't be easy, but he owed it to his wife and to himself to let go of the past and embrace the future they could build together. The weight of secrets. The warm glow of the morning sun streamed through the curtains of their new West Village brownstone, highlighting the quiet tension that lingered in the air. Adejua stood in the nursery, her hand tracing the edge of the wooden crib they'd recently assembled together. She smiled softly, remembering Adebayo's clumsy attempts to follow the instruction manual while muttering about engineers overcomplicating things. It had been one of the rare moments in recent months when they'd laughed together. Yet the laughter felt like a distant memory now. The weight of unspoken truths hung heavy between them, threatening to crack the fragile foundation of their relationship. Shadows of the past. Adebayo sat in his office downtown, the city skyline sprawling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The buzzing of his phone snapped him out of his thoughts. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It was a text from Paloma. "Dinner tonight. We need to discuss the London merger. I've made reservations at La Bijou." Adebayo hesitated. Paloma had returned to New York with impeccable timing, inserting herself into his professional life as though she'd never left. While he kept their interactions strictly business, her presence was a constant reminder of the unresolved feelings he thought he'd buried. He texted back a polite decline, citing a prior commitment, but the guilt lingered. Every time he saw Paloma, it felt like he was betraying Adejua, not because he still loved Paloma, but because he hadn't been honest with his wife about the encounters. An unexpected gesture. That evening, Adebayo arrived home earlier than usual. He found Adejua in the kitchen, stirring a pot of vegetable stew. The aroma of spices filled the air, and the sight of her, glowing with maternal radiance, momentarily eased the turmoil in his heart. "You're home early," she remarked, not looking up from her task. "I thought I'd surprise you," he replied, placing his briefcase by the door. "Let me help." Adejua raised an eyebrow, but handed him a knife to chop vegetables. They worked in companionable silence, the clatter of utensils filling the void between them. "I was thinking," Adebayo began, his tone hesitant, "maybe we could go away for a weekend. Just the two of us, before the baby comes." Adejua paused, her hand stilling over the pot. "A weekend away? Where did that come from?" "I don't know. I think we could use some time together. Somewhere quiet, away from the city." His eyes searched hers, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with. "I'll think about it," she said softly, her lips curving into a small smile. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. A glimpse of happiness. The following weekend, they drove to a secluded resort in upstate New York. The sprawling estate, surrounded by rolling hills and lush greenery, felt like a world away from the chaos of their lives in Lagos. Their cabin overlooked a serene lake, its surface reflecting the golden hues of the autumn leaves. Adejua marveled at the peacefulness, her hand resting on her belly as she sat on the porch swing. Adebayo joined her, carrying 2 steaming mugs of herbal tea. "It's beautiful here," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "I can't remember the last time I felt this relaxed." He smiled, his first genuine smile in weeks. "Maybe we should make this a tradition. A getaway every fall." Adejua turned to him, her eyes sparkling. A tradition sounds nice. For the first time in months, they allowed themselves to simply be. They took long walks along the lake, shared quiet meals by the fire, and talked about everything except the things that weighed on their hearts. It was a fleeting escape, but it reminded them of the bond they still shared. Cracks beneath the surface. Despite the brief reprieve, the shadows of the past weren't easily banished. On their last night at the resort, as they sat by the fire, sipping hot cocoa, Adejua broke the silence. "Adebayo," she began cautiously, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." He stiffened, sensing the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" "It's about Paloma," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. "I know she's back, and I know you've been working with her." Adebayo's mug froze halfway to his lips. "How do you?" "I'm not blind," Adejua interrupted gently. "I've seen the late-night emails, the texts you try to hide. I've heard your tone change when you mention her name. I need to know, is she the reason you've been so distant?" He placed the mug down, running a hand over his face. "Adejua, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," she urged, her voice trembling. "Because right now, it feels like I'm fighting for a marriage you've already given up on." Adebayo's heart clenched at her words. "I haven't given up," he said, his voice low. "I promise you, there's nothing going on between me and Paloma. She's a reminder of who I used to be, of a life I thought I wanted. And now," Adejua asked, her eyes searching his. "Now I know that life was hollow," he admitted. "Being with her wasn't real. Not like what we have." Adejua's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the ache in her chest remained. "Then why didn't you tell me she was back?" "I didn't want to upset you," he said. "I thought I could handle it on my own. But I see now that keeping it from you only made things worse." A step forward. They sat in silence, the crackling fire filling the void between them. Finally, Adebayo reached for her hand. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I want to make this right. I want to be the husband you deserve, the father our child deserves." Adejua's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "It's going to take time, Adebayo. Trust doesn't come back overnight. I'm willing to do whatever it takes," he promised. For the first time in months, Adejua felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. And sometimes, a single step forward was enough to begin healing. A fragile rebuilding. Back in Lagos, life resumed its familiar rhythm, but with subtle differences. Adebayo and Adejua tiptoed around their newfound honesty, careful not to reopen wounds that were still healing. Their shared moments felt more intentional now. Quiet dinners at home, weekend strolls through the neighborhood, and late-night conversations about the future. Yet beneath the surface, the fragility of their relationship lingered, like glass ready to shatter at the slightest pressure. Adejua, ever the optimist, poured herself into preparing for their baby's arrival. The nursery became her sanctuary, its walls painted a soft lavender and adorned with framed quotes about love and resilience. She spent hours folding tiny clothes, her heart swelling with anticipation and anxiety. This child, she hoped, would be a bridge to a stronger foundation for their marriage. For Adebayo, the balancing act between work, Paloma's reappearance, and his commitment to Adejua was proving to be an uphill battle. He spent longer hours at the office, not because he wanted to avoid his wife, but because he needed to sort through the storm of emotions he carried. He wanted to be the husband Adejua deserved, But the shadow of Paloma's return loomed large, casting doubt on his ability to move forward. An unwelcome intrusion. One rainy afternoon, as Adejua sat by the nursery window sewing tiny patches onto a baby blanket, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Hello, Adejua. This is Paloma. I believe we should meet." Adejua's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened around the phone as a surge of anger and fear coursed through her. She had never met Paloma face to face, but had imagined this moment countless times. She debated ignoring the message, but knew that doing so wouldn't make the problem disappear. "Why?" she typed back, her fingers trembling. Paloma's response was swift. "Because there are things you deserve to know. Things Adebayo won't tell you." Adejua stared at the screen, her mind racing. Her first instinct was to show the message to Adebayo, but she hesitated. She wanted to confront this woman herself, to face the storm head-on. A meeting of opposites. The next day, Adejua found herself sitting across from Paloma in an upscale cafe downtown. Paloma, dressed in a tailored black dress and flawless makeup, exuded an air of effortless sophistication. Adejua, in a simple maternity dress and minimal makeup, felt the stark contrast between them, but refused to let it undermine her confidence. "Thank you for meeting me," Paloma began, her voice as polished as her appearance. "I'm not here for pleasantries," Adejua said, her tone firm. "If you have something to say, say it." Paloma smiled faintly, as if she appreciated Adejua's directness. "Fair enough. I wanted to clarify my intentions. My return to Lagos was purely professional, but seeing Adebayo again, it stirred old feelings." Adejua's jaw tightened, but she remained silent, letting Paloma continue. "I know you're expecting a child together," Paloma said, her gaze steady. "And I don't want to cause trouble. But Adebayo and I have a history, one that doesn't simply vanish because of time or distance." Adejua's heart pounded, but she refused to let her emotions show. "So, what is it you want? Acknowledgement? Closure? Or are you here to try and take him back?" Paloma's composure faltered for a brief moment before she regained her calm demeanor. "I'm not here to take him back, but I think you should know the truth about his feelings." Adejua leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "Let me make one thing clear, Paloma. Adebayo and I are building a life together, a life that doesn't include you. If you have unresolved feelings, that's your burden to carry, not mine." Paloma nodded slowly, a flicker of respect in her expression. "You're stronger than I thought," she said, standing to leave. "I wish you luck, Adejua. You'll need it." As Paloma walked away, Adejua felt a mixture of triumph and unease. She had stood her ground, but Paloma's words lingered like an uninvited guest in her mind, unraveling the truth. That evening, Adejua confronted Adebayo as he walked through the door. She held up her phone, displaying the messages from Paloma. "Explain this," she demanded. Adebayo's face paled as he read the messages. "Adejua, I didn't know she reached out to you. I never asked her to. She claims you still have unresolved feelings for her," Adejua said, her voice trembling. "Is that true?" "No," Adebayo said firmly. "I won't deny that seeing her again brought back memories, but they're just that. Memories. My life is with you now. Our child. Our home. That's what matters to me." Adejua searched his face for signs of deceit, but found only sincerity. "Then why didn't you tell me she was reaching out?" "I didn't want to upset you," he admitted. "I thought ignoring her would make her go away." "You can't just ignore problems, Adebayo," Adejua said, tears welling in her eyes. "We're supposed to face them together. That's what a marriage is." He stepped closer, his hands resting on her shoulders. "You're right. I've handled this poorly, and I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." A moment of vulnerability. That night, as they lay in bed, Adebayo opened up in a way he never had before. "When I met Paloma, I thought she was everything I wanted. ambitious, driven, unstoppable. But being with her felt like a constant race. When she left, it hurt, but part of me was relieved. Adesua listened silently, her heart aching at the rawness in his voice. "You're different," he continued. "With you, I don't feel like I have to prove anything. You make me feel whole." Adesua reached for his hand, her fingers lacing with his. "Then stop running from the past, Adebayo. Let it go, for us, for our child." He nodded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I will. I promise." The first kick. The following week, Adesua felt the baby's first kick. She was sitting on the couch, reading a book, when the gentle flutter took her by surprise. Her eyes widened, and she immediately called for Adebayo. He rushed into the room, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" She grabbed his hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that?" A moment later, the baby kicked again, and Adebayo's face broke into a smile of pure wonder. "That's incredible." Adesua laughed, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's real, Adebayo. We're going to be parents." In that moment, the past and its burdens seemed to fade, replaced by the overwhelming promise of a future filled with possibility. The cracks deepened. The following months were a whirlwind. Adesua's pregnancy progressed, and with each passing week, the baby became a more tangible presence in their lives. Ultrasound photos were pinned to the refrigerator, the nursery was nearly complete, and Adebayo had even started reading parenting books, surprising Adesua with his sudden enthusiasm. But despite these outward signs of progress, there were cracks beneath the surface. The unresolved tension between them, rooted in Paloma's return and Adebayo's lingering guilt, was like a thread threatening to unravel their fragile harmony. Adesua could feel it, an invisible weight pressing down on her chest, even in their happiest moments. An unexpected visit. One crisp morning, as Adesua folded baby clothes in the nursery, the doorbell rang. She waddled to the door, her belly leading the way, and opened it to find Paloma standing on the threshold, an expensive handbag slung over her shoulder and a carefully neutral expression on her face. Adesua's heart sank. "What are you doing here?" "I didn't come to cause trouble," Paloma said, her tone calm but firm. "I need to speak with Adebayo." Adesua folded her arms across her chest, her protective instincts flaring. "He's at work. Whatever you have to say, you can say to me." Paloma hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Finally, she said, "I think Adebayo should hear this from me directly. But since you insist, I'll tell you. I've been offered a permanent position in London, and I've accepted. I'm leaving Lagos." Adesua blinked, caught off guard by the announcement. Relief washed over her, but she kept her expression guarded. "Why do you think he needs to know this?" "Because," Paloma said, her voice softening, "despite everything, I cared about him. And I don't want to leave without closure." Adesua's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. "Closure doesn't require a conversation. You left him once, Paloma. He moved on. If you truly cared about him, you'd let him live his life without stirring up old wounds." Paloma's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing more. She nodded once and turned to leave, her heels clicking against the pavement. Adesua closed the door, leaning against it as her legs threatened to give way. She knew this wasn't the end of it. The conversation. That evening, Adesua told Adebayo about Paloma's visit. She watched his reaction closely as she recounted the conversation, searching for any sign of lingering attachment. "She's leaving for London?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "Yes," Adesua said, her voice clipped. "And she wanted to tell you herself, as if that would make a difference." Adebayo sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't ask her to come here, Adesua. I don't know why she thinks I need to hear any of this. Maybe because you haven't made it clear to her, or to yourself, that she doesn't matter anymore." Adesua snapped, her frustration boiling over. "I'm tired of feeling like I'm competing with a ghost." "You're not competing, Adebayo said, his voice rising. I chose you, Adejua. I've been trying to prove that to you, but it seems like nothing I do is enough. Then stop keeping secrets, Adejua shot back. Be honest with me, with yourself. If you're still holding on to anything, let it go, because I can't keep fighting for this alone. The room fell silent, the air heavy with unspoken pain. Finally, Adebayo stepped closer, his voice low and filled with regret. You're right. I've been holding on to guilt, not for loving her, but for how much I hurt you by not letting her go sooner. I don't want her, Adejua. I want us. I want this family we're building. But I need you to trust me again. Adejua's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Then show me, Adebayo. Show me that this isn't just words. A new chapter. In the weeks that followed, Adebayo threw himself into being a better husband. He attended every doctor's appointment, helped Adejua with household chores, and spent hours researching the best parenting techniques. Slowly, Adejua began to let her guard down, allowing herself to believe that they could truly move forward. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Adebayo surprised Adejua with a gift. He handed her a small box wrapped in silver paper. What's this? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Open it, he said, his smile warm but nervous. Inside the box was a delicate gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a tree, its branches adorned with tiny gemstones. Adebayo explained, It's a family tree. I thought it could be a symbol of our future, the life we're creating together. Adejua's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the necklace around her neck. It's beautiful, she whispered, her fingers tracing the pendant. Thank you. Adebayo kissed her forehead. You've always been the heart of this family, Adejua. I'm just trying to catch up. The baby shower. As Adejua's due date approached, her friends and family threw her a lavish baby shower. The house was filled with laughter, music, and gifts, and for the first time in months, Adejua felt truly at peace. Adebayo, ever the attentive husband, mingled with guests and made sure Adejua was comfortable. Toward the end of the evening, Adejua's mother pulled Adebayo aside. I can see the change in you, she said, her tone kind but firm. But you must understand, love is not just about grand gestures. It's about consistency. Never stop showing her that she is enough. Adebayo nodded, her words sinking deep into his heart. I won't, he promised. She deserves everything, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that to her. The final goodbye. The day after the baby shower, Adebayo received a text from Paloma. Leaving for London tonight. I hope you find happiness, Adebayo. Goodbye. He stared at the message for a long moment before deleting it. He felt no sadness, no longing, only relief. For the first time in years, he felt free from the weight of the past. When he walked into the nursery and saw Adejua organizing the baby's clothes, he felt a surge of gratitude. This was his life now. Messy, imperfect, but filled with love. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his hands on her belly. What was that for? She asked, smiling up at him. Just reminding myself how lucky I am, he said softly. Adejua leaned into him, her heart full. For the first time in a long time, she felt like they were truly on the same page. A life-changing arrival. The days leading up to the baby's arrival were a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Adejua and Adebayo's relationship, though still fragile, had grown stronger. Each shared moment brought them closer to the trust and connection they once had. Adebayo's transformation was clear. He was present in ways he hadn't been before, and his love for Adejua and their unborn child was undeniable. It was late one stormy night, with rain tapping against the windows of their West Village brownstone, when Adejua felt the first sharp pain in her abdomen. She sat up in bed, clutching her belly, her breathing shallow and fast. Adebayo, she whispered, her voice tight with urgency. It's time. Adebayo jolted awake, immediately alert. "Are you sure? Is it?" Another contraction cut her off, and she nodded, gripping his hand tightly. "The baby's coming." A race against time. The drive to the hospital was tense and hurried. Adebayo kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other on Adejua's, murmuring reassurances as the storm raged outside. The city's usually vibrant streets were eerily quiet, the rain creating a curtain that blurred the world around them. At the hospital, a team of nurses quickly escorted Adejua to the maternity ward. Adebayo stayed by her side, his face a mask of worry and determination. As the hours passed and the contractions grew more intense, Adejua's strength and resilience shone through. She squeezed his hand during every wave of pain, her eyes meeting his with an unspoken plea for reassurance. "You're doing amazing," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." A moment of crisis. Just as they thought the baby's arrival was imminent, the mood in the delivery room shifted. The doctor's calm demeanor gave way to a look of concern as the baby's heart rate dropped. "We're seeing signs of fetal distress," the doctor explained, her voice steady but urgent. "We may need to perform an emergency C-section." Adebayo's heart plummeted. He glanced at Adejua, whose face was pale but resolute. "Whatever you need to do," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Just keep our baby safe." Adebayo kissed her forehead, his hands trembling. "You're the strongest person I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The medical team sprang into action, preparing Adejua for surgery. Adebayo was allowed to stay by her side, his presence a lifeline as she faced the uncertainty of the moment. He held her hand tightly, whispering prayers under his breath as the procedure began. The first cry. Minutes felt like hours, but finally, the room was filled with the sound of a newborn's cry, a sound that brought tears to Adebayo's eyes and a shaky smile to Adejua's lips. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, holding up the tiny, wriggling baby for them to see. Adebayo's breath caught as he saw his daughter for the first time. She was perfect, her tiny hands grasping at the air, her cries strong and determined. When the nurse placed her in Adejua's arms, the world seemed to fade away, leaving only the three of them in that moment of pure, unfiltered love. "She's beautiful," Adejua whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's perfect." Adebayo leaned over, kissing both Adejua and their daughter. "She's incredible, just like her mother." A new beginning. The days following their daughter's birth were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and quiet moments of awe as they marveled at the tiny life they had created. They named her Anth, meaning beloved, a reflection of the love that had brought them to this moment. Adebayo surprised Adejua with a small journal, its pages blank but waiting to be filled. "For Anth," he explained. "I thought we could write her letters as she grows, so she'll always know how much she's loved." Adejua's heart swelled with emotion as she held the journal, already imagining the words they would write. "She's going to know," she said softly, "because she'll see it in how we love her and each other." Facing the future together. One evening, as Ayanfa slept peacefully in her crib, Adejua and Adebayo sat together on the couch, the weight of the past months finally lifting. Adejua rested her head on Adebayo's shoulder, her fingers intertwined with his. "Do you think we've made it through the worst?" she asked quietly. Adebayo kissed the top of her head, his voice steady. "I think we've proven that we can face anything, as long as we face it together." Adejua smiled, her heart full. "I believe that too." The letter. Months later, on Ayanth's first birthday, Adejua found a folded piece of paper tucked inside the journal. It was in Adebayo's handwriting, addressed to their daughter. She opened it, her eyes scanning the words. "Dear Ayanth, the day you were born changed my life in ways I never imagined. You made me realize the depth of love and responsibility that comes with being a father. Your mother, Adejua, taught me what it means to love unconditionally and to fight for the things that truly matter. You are the bridge between us, the light that shines even in our darkest moments. As you grow, I hope you carry with you the strength and resilience of your mother, the woman who taught me to be a better man. You are our beloved, Ayanv. Never forget that. With all my love, Daddy. Tears blurred Adejua's vision as she finished reading. She handed the letter to Adebayo, her smile trembling. "You're a good man," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And an even better father." Adebayo wrapped his arms around her and Ayanv, holding them close. "It's all because of you," he said simply. "You showed me what love truly is." A new challenge. As the months passed, the delicate balance they had established began to shift once again. Life with a newborn brought both joy and chaos, but the challenges of parenthood were compounded by the constant pull of their careers. Adebayo's work with the firm had only intensified, and while Adejua was adjusting to the demands of being a mother, the strain of maintaining their marriage while caring for a newborn was beginning to take its toll. One evening, as Adejua sat in the living room nursing Ayanv, Adebayo walked in, his suit wrinkled from a long day of meetings. His exhaustion was palpable, and there was a distance in his eyes that Adejua had come to recognize all too well. "You look tired," she said, glancing up from Ayanv. "Just a long day," Adebayo replied, rubbing his temples. He dropped his briefcase on the couch and sat beside her, but there was something disconnected in his posture. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much this merger was going to take out of me." Adejua put a hand on his arm, a gesture of understanding, but her heart sank. "I get it, but we haven't had a moment for just us in weeks, Adebayo. I miss you." He glanced at their daughter in her arms, his gaze softening for a moment. "I miss you too, Adejua. I know I haven't been present enough. It's just, there's so much going on. I don't want to let you down." Adejua took a deep breath. Her voice steadied despite the worry bubbling inside her. "You're not letting me down. But we need to find a way to balance everything, or we're going to lose each other again. I don't want to lose you." A growing disconnect. Over the following weeks, their attempts at reconnection seemed to falter. Adebayo, despite his promises, continued to pour more of himself into his work, missing dinner after dinner, coming home late, and growing more distant. Adejua tried to be understanding, to give him space to navigate his responsibilities, but as time passed, the strain of it all began to erode her patience. One evening, as Adebayo entered the living room after another long day, Adejua turned to him, her arms crossed. "Another late night." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sorry, Adejua. Don't apologize," she cut in, her voice low but firm. "Don't apologize for not being here. I need you here, Adebayo. I need your support. We're supposed to be in this together." Adebayo's frustration flared. "I'm doing the best I can. I can't just drop everything. This merger is important. And so is us, Adebayo." Adejua's voice rose, the weight of her frustration finally breaking through. "Our family, our marriage, it's falling apart, and you're too busy with your work to notice." The silence that followed was heavy. Adebayo stood frozen, his face etched with guilt. "I don't know what you want me to do," he said quietly, his voice strained. "I'm trying to provide for you, for Ayanv. I thought you understood that." "I do understand," Adejua replied, her voice breaking. "But I didn't sign up for a life alone with a child. I didn't sign up for a marriage where I feel like I'm invisible." Adebayo's heart sank, the weight of her words crashing down on him. He had always believed he was doing what was best for his family. But now he realized that in his quest to provide, he had neglected what truly mattered. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I didn't see it. I didn't see how much I was hurting you." The crossroads. In the days that followed, Adejua withdrew into herself. She focused on caring for Ayanv, trying to fill the void left by Adebayo's absence, but the pain of his neglect was ever present. Adebayo, meanwhile, spent every waking moment trying to prove that he could change, that he could be the husband and father he knew Adejua deserved. He began taking fewer late-night meetings and making more of an effort to be present, but the damage had already been done. One afternoon, as the three of them sat in the park, Adebayo watched Adejua push Anne's stroller, her face a mask of indifference. He reached out to take her hand, but she pulled away, her gaze focused on the path ahead. "Adejua, please," he said softly. "I'm trying. I know I messed up. I'll keep trying. I need you to let me back in." She stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes filled with emotion. "Adebayo, you don't get it, do you? I've been trying to hold this family together. I've been trying to hold us together, but I can't do it alone. I need you, not just as the father of our child, but as the partner I thought I married. If that's too much for you, then I don't know where we go from here." Adebayo's heart shattered at her words, but he refused to let her see his weakness. Instead, he nodded, his voice steady. "I'll do better. I have to do better. For you, for Ayanf." But in his heart, he knew that words alone weren't enough. He had to prove himself. He had to show Adejua that she wasn't just a footnote in his life, that she was the center of it all. A critical decision. The following week, as they sat in their living room, the weight of their conversation still hung heavily in the air. Adebayo turned to Adejua, his voice quiet but resolute. "I've decided to take a step back at work. I've spoken to my partners, and I'm going to scale back my hours. I want to be more present. I want to be here with you and Anv." Adejua looked at him, her heart torn. She knew this was a step in the right direction, but after everything that had happened, it was hard to trust that the change would last. "I'm scared, Adebayo," she whispered. "I'm scared that we're too broken to fix." He reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "We're not broken, Adejua. We're just lost. But I'll find my way back to you. I promise." Adejua squeezed his hand, the words she had longed to hear finally reaching her heart. "I'll be here," she said, her voice steady. "I'll wait for you. But I need to see that you're truly committed, that you're in this for the long haul, not just when it's convenient." Adebayo nodded, his resolve hardening. "I'm in this, Adejua. I'm in this with you, for Ayanf, forever." Rebuilding trust. As the months passed, Adebayo kept his promise. He scaled back his hours at work, prioritizing his family in ways he hadn't before. He became a more present father, helping with late-night feedings, soothing Anv when she cried, and spending hours playing with her on the floor, his laughter mixing with hers. Slowly, the warmth that had once defined their relationship began to return. Adejua, though cautious, started to let herself trust him again, but the journey was far from easy. Their evenings, once filled with distance, now became moments of connection. They would sit together, with Ayanf between them, watching her giggle as Adebayo made silly faces. The small, everyday moments began to weave them back together. But there were still echoes of the past that neither could ignore. The past lingers. One evening, after Adebayo had put Ayanf to bed, he and Adejua sat in the living room, the soft glow of the table lamp casting long shadows across the room. Adebayo could feel the weight of her gaze as she stared out the window, her expression distant. "Adejua, talk to me," he said, his voice soft but insistent. She turned to him, her eyes tired but searching. "I know you're trying, Adebayo. I see it. But sometimes I feel like I'm still alone in this marriage." The words hit Adebayo like a physical blow. He moved closer to her, taking her hand. "I don't want you to feel alone. I never did. I've been selfish. I see that now. But I'm here. I'm all in, Adejua. You and Ayanfe are my world." She shook her head, the pain of the past still fresh in her eyes. "You weren't here, Adebayo. I was doing everything by myself. And I can't forget that. I can't forget the way you let me feel invisible. Adebayo's heart ached at her words, and for a moment, he was silent. I can't change the past, he said quietly, his voice breaking. I can only show you every day that I am here now. For you, for Ayanv. I know it won't erase the hurt, but it's all I can give. Adejua took a deep breath, her voice softening. I know. I want to believe you. I do. But it's hard to shake the feeling that you'll slip away again. Adebayo squeezed her hand tighter. I won't, I promise. I'm here. This time, I'm here for good. The tipping point. Life, however, was not without its hurdles. Adejua's work in medicine continued to demand much of her, especially as Ayanf grew older and more curious about the world around her. The late nights at the hospital, the moments when she was too tired to keep her eyes open, often left her frustrated and questioning if she was doing enough. She had once been so focused on her career, but now the delicate balance between being a mother, a wife, and a successful resident felt like an impossible tightrope to walk. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, Adejua came home to find Adebayo pacing the living room, looking agitated. His jaw was set, and his brow furrowed in a way she had grown familiar with during the more stressful times of his career. Everything okay? She asked, trying to shake the exhaustion from her voice. I just got a call from the firm, Adebayo said, his tone clipped. The merger in London has hit a snag. They need me there to manage it. Immediately. Adejua's heart sank. Another work emergency. She wanted to be supportive, to understand that his career was important, but her patience was wearing thin. She had grown used to this, the constant string of work calls, the hours slipping by when he should have been home. Adebayo, you promised, she said, her voice trembling with frustration. You promised you'd be here, that things would be different. And now, you're leaving again. You don't think I need you here. Adebayo looked at her, his face a mixture of guilt and frustration. This isn't about me, Adejua. It's about my career. I can't just leave the firm in a bind. You know how important this is. I know, she snapped, her anger bubbling to the surface. But it's always about your career, Adebayo. What about me? What about us? I can't keep doing this. I'm drowning in it, and you're nowhere to be found. For a long moment, the silence between them was deafening. Adejua's eyes were filled with unused tears as she stood in front of him, feeling the weight of all the years of sacrifice, all the moments she had given up for this marriage. Adebayo saw the hurt in her eyes, the deep, aching pain that he had caused once again. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his voice cracking. I thought I could handle it. I thought I could do everything, be the husband, the father, the provider. But I was wrong. I've been wrong for a long time. Adejua looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can keep giving and giving, only to be left with nothing. The breaking point. The argument hung in the air like a storm cloud, and for the first time in months, Adejua considered the unthinkable. She needed space, space to think, to breathe, to find herself again. She needed to stop pouring all of her energy into a marriage that felt like it was slipping through her fingers. The next morning, she packed a small bag, not for a long trip, but for a few days away from the weight of their home. She kissed Ayanf goodbye, leaving her with Adebayo, and walked out the door, leaving behind a note for Adebayo to find. I need time to think. I'll be back when I'm ready. She didn't know where she was going or what would happen when she returned. All she knew was that she couldn't continue down this path of endless sacrifice and disappointment without finding herself again. A heartbroken reunion. 3 days later, Adejua returned to their brownstone. Adebayo was waiting for her, his face a picture of remorse and worry. She could see the sleepless nights in his eyes, the deep sorrow in the way he looked at her. Adejua, he said, his voice shaking. Please, I know I've hurt you. I know I've let you down over and over. but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, to be the man you need." She took a deep breath, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. "I don't know if you can fix it, Adebayo. I don't know if we can go back to what we had before." He stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking you to let me build something new with you, something that's real. For us and for Ayanf." Adejua looked at him for a long moment, the weight of their shared past pressing down on her. "I can't promise you anything," she said softly, her voice filled with both sadness and hope. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can rebuild." And with that, the last of the walls she had built between them began to crumble. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be immediate. But for the first time in years, both of them were willing to put in the work, not just to survive, but to thrive. A new beginning. Adejua's return marked the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. The storm that had once torn through their marriage had not passed, but its intensity had softened. There were still difficult conversations, moments of doubt, and unspoken fears, but both of them were committed to the process. The road to healing wasn't linear, but it was theirs to walk together. Adebayo, having realized how much he had taken for granted, worked hard to show Adejua that he was truly all in. He took on more of the responsibilities at home, staying with Ayanf while Adejua took time for herself, whether it was to take a walk in the park or to simply sit in silence, gathering her thoughts. It was a new rhythm, one that felt unfamiliar yet comforting in its honesty. They attended counseling together, learning how to communicate better, how to understand each other's needs, and how to reconcile their differences without resorting to old habits of avoidance and miscommunication. Adejua began to feel like she wasn't alone in this journey anymore. Slowly but surely, Adebayo began to rebuild the trust he had lost. But more than that, he began to rebuild their connection, one small gesture at a time. Parenthood as a team. As the months passed, Adebayo and Adejua began to settle into their new roles as parents. Their daughter, Ayanf, grew into a curious and vibrant toddler, her laughter filling the house with warmth. Both of them had to adapt to the constant changes that came with raising a child, but they did it side by side. Even on their toughest days, when exhaustion weighed heavily on their shoulders, they found solace in each other's presence. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Ayanf sleeping peacefully in her crib, Adejua looked at Adebayo with a sense of quiet gratitude. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Adebayo smiled softly, his gaze never leaving hers. "Yes, we have. And it hasn't been easy. But we're still here, together." Adejua nodded, her heart full of conflicting emotions. "I never thought I'd get to this point," she admitted, her voice low. "There were times when I thought I'd be better off alone, but I was wrong. I needed you, and I needed us." Adebayo reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "I'm so sorry for everything, Adejua. I've made mistakes, but I will never stop trying to make it right." She looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the man she had once fallen in love with. "I believe you," she said softly, "and I'm willing to keep going, to keep trying too." The turning point. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Adebayo took another important step toward rebuilding their trust. They were at the park, Ayanf running ahead, her tiny legs carrying her quickly, her giggles echoing in the air. Adebayo watched her with pride. But then his gaze shifted to Adejua, who was sitting on a bench nearby. He joined her, sitting down beside her, his eyes thoughtful. "Adejua," he began, his voice a little tentative. "I've been thinking. I know we've come a long way, but I want us to take the next step. I want to be a family, not just in name, but in everything we do." Adejua turned to him, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "I want to make it official," Adebayo said, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet determination. "I want to buy us a house, our house, somewhere we can truly call home. Somewhere where we can build the future we deserve, as a family." Adejua's breath caught in her chest, a mixture of shock and hope filling her heart. "Adebayo, are you sure?" He nodded. "I am. I've been thinking about it for a while. I want us to create something solid, something unshakable. I know we've had our struggles, but I want our home to be a symbol of everything we've fought for." Tears welled in Adejua's eyes as she reached for his hand. "I never thought you'd say that," she whispered. "But I want that too. I want to build a life with you, Adebayo. A new home, a new future." A few months later, Adebayo and Adejua moved into their new home, a place they had chosen together. It wasn't just a house. It was a symbol of their journey, their resilience, and their love. The house was warm and inviting, with light pouring in through large windows, just like the hope they had for the future. Every room felt like a reflection of them, a reflection of their commitment to creating something better. As they stood together in the living room, Adebayo looked around, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "This is ours, Adejua. We built this, and we'll continue to build it together." Adejua smiled, her eyes meeting his. "This is just the beginning. There's so much more ahead of us." And in that moment, everything felt right. They had come through the storms of the past, and while the road ahead wouldn't be easy, it was theirs to walk together. With Ayant laughing in the background, they knew that no matter what life brought their way, they would face it as a family, united, strong, and unwavering. The legacy of love. As the years went by, Adebayo and Adejua's bond grew stronger. They celebrated milestones, small and large, together. Birthdays, anniversaries, the first steps of their second child, and the quiet, intimate moments that reminded them why they had fought so hard for their marriage. Ayantfe, growing up in a house filled with love and support, flourished into a kind, compassionate young woman. And as she grew, so did the understanding between Adebayo and Adejua. They had become a team, a family that didn't just survive but thrived. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset together, Adejua turned to Adebayo. "Do you remember when we thought we couldn't make it?" she asked, her voice filled with quiet wonder. Adebayo smiled, his eyes soft with affection. "I remember, and I'm glad we proved ourselves wrong." "We've come a long way," Adejua said, resting her head on his shoulder. "And we'll keep going, no matter what." Adebayo kissed the top of her head. "Together," he whispered. And with that, they both knew that the love they had fought for, the life they had built, was unbreakable. Their past had shaped them, but it was their future, together, that would define them.